أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية أمير المؤمنين والأئمة المعصومين عليهم السلام والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود فطر الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالصخور ميدان أرضه ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين حبيب الله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الحكيم وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد من الله على المؤمنين إذ بعث فيهم رسولا من أنفسهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. I begin in the name of Allah, the most kind, the most merciful. It's due to that kindness and mercy that we get these opportunities where we gather in remembrance and glorification of Him, Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Then we begin this sermon the way the commander of the faithful, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhima afdalus salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Would begin many of his sermons by saying, Usikum ibadallah bitaqwallah. That I advise you, the servants of God, to be God-conscious, God-fearing, and pious human beings. We are discussing the eighth right, or the eighth haqq, as described in Risalatul Huqooq by our fourth Imam alayhi salam, and that is haqqul batan, the right of the stomach. And in the previous sermon, we had talked about avoiding food which is haram. It is the first obligation that is mentioned by our Imam alayhi salam. And we looked at a few of the rulings of Sayyid Sistani Hafidhahullah, where we see that his rulings are geared towards making life simpler for us. So again, to go back and listen to them, it would make sense of what our responsibilities are when it is our duty to go make sure that the food is halal. Another obligation we have with the stomach, as is described by our Imam alayhi salam, is not to overeat. The Imam alayhi salam says that you should be determined to eat what is lawful and not exceed the bounds of strengthening to the extent of belittling your stomach by overeating. Yani you need to strengthen yourself by food, but do not cross the bounds of that strengthening by then overeating, the Imam says, to the point where you lose your chivalry or manliness that is sometimes described. We're all aware of the dangers of overeating. And when you look at it from a physical perspective, we are told that one who overeats consistently, it will lead to an unhealthy weight gain and obesity. And then when we reach that stage of obesity, it has been linked to diabetes, heart disease, and other deadly illnesses. You find, right, I wouldn't say surprisingly, but most first world countries, especially here in North America, obesity is a tremendous problem that we see within our society, where everything is large or extra large in how they serve in their portions. It's interesting if we travel to different countries and see what their large is compared to what our small is. It's pretty much the same size that is given. But this is that production of constantly wanting to satisfy and wanting to give, leading to overeating and leading to obesity. And so that's the problem of overeating on a consistent basis. However, we are also told that a single instance of overeating can have short-term consequences like bloating, gas, heartburn, acidity, etc., etc. So from a physical perspective, we are well aware of the dangers of overeating. However, overeating is not only cautioned to the extent of being forbidden in Islam for physical reasons, but also due to spiritual reasons. We find many traditions that describe the effects of overeating. For example, we have a tradition reported from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says, "Iyyakum wa fudulul mit'am." That be warned against excessive food. فَإِنَّهُ يَسِمُ الْقَلْبِ بِالْقَسْوَةِ, because it poisons the heart with hardness. It slows the limbs in performing acts of obedience and blocks the soul from hearing counsel. Very interesting, right? When you look at the effects of that, sometimes we feel that how come I don't have that nishad, that drive to pray that extra salah? How come I don't have the drive to read that extra Quran? From our physical understanding or from the spiritual understanding, one of the main culprits to that feeling is our stomachs, right? What we put into our stomachs. I want you to pay attention to this, right? Because you'll notice what you eat has an effect on you, and how much you eat has an effect on you. And if you happen to eat at a restaurant that proclaims itself to be halal, and you have done your investigation of what is required based on Sharia, but it turns out that maybe that restaurant wasn't up to the standards, you will immediately feel it in your spirituality. Immediately, right? And I know that I have many examples that I've shared with you in the past of how I have seen my own spirituality suffer because of a particular place, for example, and that's an indication from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we should be more careful and avoid then such places. So if we are focused on that, right? If we were constantly working on our spirituality, you would be able to tell immediately when your spirituality becomes dented because of what we put into our stomachs. And so because of these effects of food, both from the physical and the spiritual, we find that Islam emphasizes the importance of control of our diet. Again, we get another tradition from our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says in a very beautiful advice that I think we should all follow, Kul wa anta tashtahi wa amsik wa anta tashtahi. He says that eat when you desire and stop while you still desire. Yeah? That's a very beautiful explanation of control, right? We as human beings sometimes, we are run by our stomachs, right? And we are programmed this way. So for example, even when I'm at work, I have a certain lunch time, isn't it? My lunch time, let's say, is from 12 to 1. And even though I may not be hungry, because that's my lunch time, I gotta eat, right? But the Imam alayhi salam or the Prophet here in this tradition tells us that, look, you need to understand when to eat and how much to eat. And so when you are not desiring to eat, don't eat, right? Don't eat because it's the only thing to do. And it's for people who have this problem of binge eating, we're actually going to talk about it in the second sermon. It's quite interesting. But we need to learn how to be able to control ourselves. The second aspect is even more difficult, right? Where while I still desire to eat some more, I have to stop myself from that. Because our stomach takes about, 15-20 minutes to give indication to our brain that we are full, right? And so if we keep eating and then we become overfull because that time that it took to let our brains know wasn't that fast. And so it's a skill, I would say, right? Where I can control my soul. You know, sometimes when you have something so delicious, while you're still eating, you're already thinking about the second plate, right? Like, I can't wait to go back and get some more. But then you have to realize that at that time, we have to learn how to control ourselves. And this is where, you know, that one of the best ways that Islam teaches us to practice self-control when it comes to food is by embracing hunger. By being accustomed to hunger. There are many benefits to hunger. In the hadith of Mi'raj, our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, asks Allah, Ya Rabbi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, ma mirathul ju'. What is the benefits or the outcome of hunger? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies back with the following. He says, the benefits of hunger are wisdom, protection of the heart. You will draw closer to me while hungry. You will be less burdened on the people. You will be more inclined to speak the truth. And you will lack concern whether one lives in wealth or poverty. Yeah? Look at the beautiful benefits of hunger, right? But we don't experience that often. Right? We don't experience that. And you know, it's quite amazing is that when Islam teaches us all the benefits of hunger, we see how we are not accustomed to that, especially when you come to Shahru Ramadan, right? In Shahru Ramadan, one of the biggest complaints that we get is that I am too sluggish in Shahru Ramadan. My brain doesn't function the way it normally does because I don't have that cup of coffee, for example, in the morning, right? My stomach is not filled with breakfast, so I don't have that energy to go on. That is an indication of how accustomed we are to constantly being full and that we are not used to being hungry. Because if we were accustomed to being hungry, then it would be the opposite effect, where God says you would have wisdom when you are hungry. Yeah? You'd be able to speak more eloquently when you are hungry. You'd be able to communicate, tell the truth. All of these benefits that God says would come with us being hungry, we don't experience it because throughout the year, we are always in the inclination towards having our stomachs full. And so this is something that I think all of us need to practice ourselves. There's no other way to do this besides that, where we learn to accept hunger at times, where we learn to look forward to hunger certain times, and then follow that prophetic advice about eating when we desire and stopping to eat while we still desire. Inshallah, if God gives us life, we'll continue with another discussion regarding our stomach next week. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. صدق الله العلي العظيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله قاسم الجبارين مبير الظالمين مدرك الهاربين نكال الظالمين صريخ المستصرخين موضع حاجات الطالبين معتمد المؤمنين. اللهم صل على خاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين محمد. اللهم صل على آل محمد وصل على سيد الوصيين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب. السلام. اللهم صل على وآل محمد وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. على محمد وآل محمد وصل على سبتي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. صل على محمد وآل محمد وصل على علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة القائم المهدي صل على محمد وآل محمد صلاة لا غاية لعددها ولا نهاية لمددها ولا نفاد لأمدها. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات وتابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. For the past 2 weeks we have been discussing in the second sermon about mental health and mental illness. And again, just for the sake of definitions, we have defined or doctors define mental health as the ability to cope with the challenges of day-to-day struggle. That when one undergoes stresses, they might respond with anxiety, they might respond with nervousness, they might respond with sadness, but then they're able to regain control of themselves and then act accordingly. While mental illness is when one does not have the ability to cope with day-to-day struggles, right? And we know that struggles are a part of life. But however, when people have mental illnesses, they are not able to see an outcome. They are not able to see that light that many of us are able to see, or they have a prolonged episode where they are constantly entering from one door to another with these different symptoms. What I want to talk about today are some specific examples of mental illness to bring about awareness, right, within our societies and within our community. So one of the first examples of mental illness is anxiety disorders. Okay. Now, in the lecture series that we gave about sabr here at Masumeen, it was a 6-part lecture. We talked about how the opposite of sabr is jaza, right? Where the opposite of patience is not impatience, but it's actually anxiety. The anxiety that I feel leads me to act impatiently. Right? It's a fascinating understanding from an Islamic akhlaqi perspective. But when we talk about anxiety disorders, that's not the anxiety that we are referring to. You and I feel anxiety all the time, right? When something doesn't go right, we feel anxious. When there is something that is pending, that is unknown, naturally we feel anxious. That discussion of sabr taught us how to overcome that anxiety. However, anxiety disorder is something else. It is a prolonged episode of anxiety that doesn't end, basically. And it causes unexpected or unhelpful anxiety that seriously impacts our lives, including how we think, we feel, and we act. Anxiety disorders affect 1 in 10 Canadians, right? And I'm sure that we've encountered people or have met people who have these different types of anxieties. Again, 1 in 10 is a high number, right, of people who suffer from anxiety disorders. What are some examples of anxiety disorders? For example, phobias, where we have an unreasonable fear of objects, animals, or situations. I met a young sister who had anxiety disorders, and her fear was earthquakes. She watched a National Geographic video on earthquakes and then feared an earthquake happening at any time, and therefore she lived her entire life in that sense of anxiety. For people who are not going through that type of mental illness, we would look at that and say, Baba, you don't have to fear. Earthquake in Canada hasn't happened in so long, for example. But in their mind, there is this fear of this, and it drives them and it controls their entire lives. These are very serious concerns, you know, and it's something that we can't scoff at. We can't just say that, oh, just grow up kind of thing. These are real things that require attention in our lives. Another example of anxiety disorders are panic disorders, where we have episodes of intense, sudden fear and physical symptoms like difficulty breathing. We have, for example, selective mutism, where in a situation where I feel anxious, I don't talk and I don't want to talk, right? It's important. I gave this example, that we deal with people all the time. We meet people all the time. And, like when I teach madrasa, for example, I wish I had this knowledge 7 years ago when I started teaching here, for example. Because sometimes in class, you'll have students who will not participate, right? And we will pick on those students and say, tell me something, why aren't you talking, why aren't you talking? When in reality, they could be suffering from selective mutism, where they're anxious, they get too nervous to talk. And these type of examples or situations happen all the time. And this is why we have to be very careful, that Islam always teaches us that don't rush to judgment when you talk to people. Don't rush to judgment when you meet people, because people could be going through different challenges in life that you and I are just not familiar with. And because we're not familiar with it, we're going to judge it based on how we look at things. But the reality is that people are undergoing different challenges in life, and we have to be able to understand that and cope with that. And of course, it would help if the person who is undergoing that challenge would inform us. But again, they're suffering through anxiety. They don't have the courage to do so right now. They're afraid to do so because maybe they're afraid of a stigma attached to it. Maybe they're afraid of being judged, for example. And so there's this component, that we all need to work together in this. You know what I mean? Where I don't push so hard, and you allow me to come closer to you as well, and we can work together to solve these problems. Another example of anxiety disorders is obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, right? Where they're unable to control the repetition or unwanted thoughts of an action. In Islam, we call that kathiru shak, right? When one is frequently doubting. So for example, you will have people who it will take them anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours just to do ghusl, for example, right? You have people who take hours just to do wudu, for example. A 4 rakat salah takes them so long, right? Where it overtakes their life altogether, And Islam always teaches that these are real things that we need to address and be concerned about. So that's the first example of a disorder, where that is anxiety disorder. Our first example of mental illness. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ma salli ala wa ali Muhammad. Another example of mental illness is eating disorders, right? There are 3 main types of eating disorders. The first is anorexia, the second is bulimia, and the third is binge eating. Anorexia is when one restricts the amount of food they eat because they feel that they are overweight. And in reality, regardless of their actual weight, right? Now, what causes that? We're not going to talk about all that. You can do research on this, right? But a lot of the times, people who are anorexic are not overweight to begin with. It's in their minds that they think that they're overweight, right? And society doesn't help with that. Society tells us that, for example, for you to be an ideal person, this is the body type you need to have, and this is how you should look. And so when people are constantly seeing that in social media, constantly being exposed to those type of things, they then apply that same effect into their own lives. So anorexia is something which is serious, right? Because it can cause heart and kidney problems, low blood iron, bone loss, digestive problems, low heart rate, low blood pressure. In women, it can cause fertility problems. And as many as 10% of people who have anorexia eventually die from anorexia. Yeah? Either because of health problems or suicide. So that's 1 in 10 people will die because of this. These are like serious things that I'm surprised, that I haven't talked about it before. It's my fault. It should have been addressed a long time ago, I think. The next is bulimia. Bulimia involves period of uncontrollable binge eating. That means I will eat as much as I can, followed by purging, meaning then I will vomit everything out. Right? So I can't control myself from eating, but then I don't want it in my stomach either, and so I will vomit it out. The third is binge eating, where it involves periods of overeating where literally they can't control themselves from stopping to eat, right? I think many of us, tying in with the subject that we did in the first sermon, we do binge eat sometimes. Sometimes chocolate does feel nice, right? When I'm stressed, ice cream does feel good, for example, right? But when people are suffering through binge eating disorder, there's no limit to that. It doesn't stop, it continues, right? And then of course the health ramifications after that. The next one, and we'll stop here, is schizophrenia, okay? Schizophrenia is the most serious form of mental illness because schizophrenia, once that switch is turned on, doctors tell us there's nothing to turn it back off. And one of the things that triggers schizophrenia affects 1 in 100 Canadians. 1 in 100 Canadians will suffer from schizophrenia. And it tends to appear mostly when the body is going hormonal changes in adolescence. And we've talked about this when we talked about cannabis a few weeks ago, that one of the triggers of schizophrenia is binge smoking of cannabis. So when our children will smoke, for example, and they will smoke a lot in a short period of time, I've spoken to ER doctors who say a few patients a month, youth, come into the ER because marijuana has triggered within them schizophrenia, right? And this is why you'll find that most of the doctors were not thrilled that Canada legalized cannabis, because it will lead to a higher mental health illness problem within our society. The last one is depression, which we're going to talk about next week, because I believe depression is something that needs more time on it to discuss, because it is something that we see suffering, that many people suffer from. What's important, I think, for us to understand, and I know I'm taking more time than usual, but this is important, yeah, is that most of the people who suffer from mental illness will do it alone, right? They're not going to let you know that they have bulimia. They're not going to let you know that they have anxiety disorders, because again, there is a stigma attached to it. They're afraid of being judged and of being shamed maybe as well, and so they will hide their conditions, right? But I think it's important, that we become aware of the signs and symptoms, because maybe this is happening in our own house, right? It's happening with our own children, it's happening with our own spouse, and so it could be happening with us, you know what I mean? So that we need to learn the symptoms, because sometimes I may be too afraid to come out and ask you, but if I get a helping hand, I may be able to share what my fears are and what my anxiety is, or what is affecting me. So I hope, inshallah, we do some research on our own. Material is all there online, and I'm hoping, inshallah, that the stigma ends within our community so that we can help the people who truly need help. Wa akhiru da'wanan alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Sadaqallahul aliyyul azim.